Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So there are a bunch of studs in the NHL that are now in their 20s. We have fully transitioned from the Sidney Crosby, Alexander Ovechkin old head era into this new era. So I thought it'd be a fun idea to give you a video, peak off-season content, of giving you my top 10 players that I would start a franchise with if I was trying to be a competitive team. We're not going to go some like rebuild or like you have like 3 more years in your window. I'm looking at the next like 10 to 15 years and looking at all the talent in the NHL. What would my draft be based on how good they are? Obviously, that's the one that matters the most. What is their talent? What their potential is if they're like under the age of 25? What their contract is and what their age is. Contract is going to play a factor in here, and you're going to see some of the pictures and say, well, why is that guy ahead of them? Contract does matter. There still is a salary cap. We're not going NHL 24 turning the salary cap off. So, without further ado, let's dive into it. Top 10 players that I would start a franchise with. And obviously, positional value means a little bit in this, but we're going to look at it. Let's go up first. Not a surprise. Conor McDavid, he's still first. He proved this playoffs that the gap between him and whoever you have second, it is a big gap. He is by far the best player on the planet. Even in a down year this year, he had 133 goddamn points. So in looking at him, he has 2 years left at $12.5 million. Even if he gets whatever, a $14, $15 million contract, he's legitimately $17 to $18 million player. He's only well, he's a little bit on this list. He's actually older than some of the guys, but he's only 27 years old. You're going to get at least 3 to 4 years of him probably no doubt being the best player in the entire NHL, then a top 3 player or the best player for another 3 years, top 10. If he follows a Sidney Crosby, I think he might age a little bit worse than a Sidney Crosby just because he's more so skating reliant, but he's still going to be a fantastic player very late into his 30s and early 40s if he continues to play. You're picking Conor McDavid. He can elevate literally any group. You've seen some of the teams that he's dragged the Edmonton Oilers to the playoffs with. He's a stud. He's first overall without a doubt. At second overall, we maybe start getting a little bit controversial. In my opinion, this pick isn't that controversial, but I'm going with Connor McDavid, 18 years old. He's still 18. His birthday is July 17th, and based on his rookie season this year where he was just below a point per game, I think that he's got to be second here. First off, you look at him just the next 2 years. Don't get me wrong. He's going to be the worst player right now on this list, but even the next 2 years on an ELC, the value of that is insane. I can make an argument that in terms of money, in terms of dollar signs and player talent, he might be the most valuable player in the entire NHL next season. And when looking at him, I think we can agree based on that rookie year, he probably is going to be that generational player. Is he going to ever steal the throne from McDavid as the best player in the NHL? Maybe that won't happen until he's 27, 28. But I think in no time, I think next season he's going to establish himself as a top 25 player. Then the year after, top 10. And then by the time this guy's 22, 23, he's going to be a top 5, probably top 3 player in the NHL. So I think you go with Bedard. He's just that special with talent, and this rookie season really proved that. Third is when it actually starts to get really controversial. I think a lot of people are going to agree with me on Bedard on third or on second, but at third, I got Jack Hughes. This is contract. This has a lot to do with the contract as well as age. Jack Hughes just turned 23 years old like a month or 2 ago, so he's still very young. And the fact that he is on a contract that pays him only $8 million over the next 6 seasons is still arguably the best contract in the entire NHL. 23 years old, you're getting him for his entire prime the next 6 years, and he's probably, if he is fully healthy, this guy is at the bare minimum going to be a 100-point guy like he was back in 2022, 2023, where he had 98 points in 78 games. So that's like the floor, I think, for a healthy Jack Hughes. If not, I personally think that if he's fully healthy, if the Devils bounce back, he's going to go for 110, 115 points. Again, at $8 million. A lot of these guys on this list are making between $12, $13 million. So would you rather have Jack Hughes, even though let's say Jack Hughes never becomes a true top 5 player in the NHL, I think we can agree that he's definitely top 13. I have him, I start my list on July 15th, but he's around 9th through 12th in my opinion right now. But when looking at him, I still think that he can grow in his game. And at only $8 million, it's one of the best contracts in the NHL. So I am going with Jack Hughes here. I can understand if you don't have him here based on the down year that he had when he was injured and the Devils kind of stunk it up. But for me, he's still third on this list. At fourth, Nathan McKinnon, obviously a better player than Jack Hughes. He is the second best player in the entire NHL, in my opinion, but he turns 29 this September. He has like a really early birthday for the 2013 draft. He like just I think his birthday is like September 14th. The cutoff's September 15th. So he turns 29 in September. He has 7 years left at $12.5 million. Still a fantastic player. Still the second best center in the NHL when he's fully healthy. He was fully healthy last year. He hadn't been fully healthy in previous years. He can get you 140 goddamn points. So still elite. Going to be high top 3 player for the next 3 to 4 years probably. Might start tapering off after that. But I still think even though he is going to be 28 soon, he is still well worth being a top 5 player when looking at building a franchise. 5th, I got his teammate, Kale Marner. 3 years left at $9 million. Fantastic contract. He's only 25 years old. This year was a bit of a down year for him. I know offensively he was fantastic, but his defensive numbers kind of slipped, and even his even strength offensive numbers really weren't that good, and his numbers away from McKinnon really weren't that impressive. But when Kale Marner is at the height of his powers, like he was back in 2022, he's the best defenseman in the entire NHL. I don't think that is an exaggeration. I don't think that's like debatable, honestly. Maybe Quinn Hughes was better this season. I'm still taking Kale Marner overall, without a doubt, over him. So you get the best defenseman in the NHL for the next 3 to 5 years. He's going to be the best guy. And considering how high level this guy is, he should be a top 5 guy between the ages of 31 through 35. In the next 3 years, he's on one of the best defenseman contracts in the NHL. At 6th, Draisaitl, 1 more year at 8.5. So when looking at it, if you're trying to win next year, you're not going to find much of a better bet than Leon Draisaitl at $8.5 million. He is 26 years old. He's a bit on the older side of the guys listed, but still not that old. He still has like 4 top 10 seasons left for sure within him. And this is a guy that with his amazing IQ, passing ability, and just overall shot, he should age very well into his 30s. So you're going to have a superstar for a while. 7th, I have Austin Matthews, 26 years old. His contract kicks in this season, 4 years, $13.25 million. Is the highest paid player in the NHL, but I think he's worth that when looking at, and I think he's going to get passed by Draisaitl. Draisaitl's going to get an 8-year deal at $13.5, $14 million arguably, and then McDavid in 2 years is also going to get more than that. So he's the highest paid player right now. He's not the best player, but he gives you 6 this year. Last year, even though he wasn't making 13.25, he was well worth $13.25 million. 69 goals, very, very good defensively. With his amazing shot, he should be able to age pretty well, similarly to an Alexander Ovechkin. He's a much better defensive player than an Alexander Ovechkin. So when looking at it, I think a 7 spot is very solid for an Austin Matthews. At number 8, we get a little bit controversial yet again. Tim Stutz, but this again is going back to the contract. He has 7 years left on a contract that only pays him $8.35 million. A little bit of a down year this year. He fully broke out. He arguably might have been top 5 on this list last year when he had 39 goals, 51 assists for 90 points. He was just under point per game this year. I believe 72 points in 75 games. But it was he was very unlucky. The Sens, not the best season. I think he's going to get back to being a 90-point player. And he's only 22 years old. He just turned 22 years old. So he still has room to grow. If he becomes a 100-point guy, similarly to a Jack Hughes, you get him for his entire prime at only $8.35 million, where I think he's going to be a top 15 player in the NHL. So given that contract, I am confident enough to put him here at 8th compared to some guys that are definitely better right now, but are 4 to 6 years older and make significantly more. I'm putting Tim Stutz here. I still fully believe in him. At 9th, David Pastrnak, 7 years left at $11.25 million. Again, Stutz definitely is not as good as David Pastrnak. I don't even know if he's going to ever be as good as David Pastrnak right now, but Pasta is on a deal paying him almost $3 million more on top of being 6 years older. But Pasta is fantastic. Pasta is going to continue being like a one-man offensive engine for the Boston Bruins for at least the next 2 to 3 years. This guy carries them every single season. I think the last 2 years he's led the Boston Bruins in points by like 40. It is insane what this guy can do, even with pretty subpar center play. So when looking at Pastrnak, I'm perfect. The 11.25 is kind of a steal the next 2 to 3 years when looking at how effective he has been. He's been a great arguably top 5 offense. Definitely last year was top 5 offensively in the league. This year there was just so many fantastic seasons, but he's great, and I think that he deserves a spot in the top 10. Now at the 10 spot, it's really up for interpretation. I ended up going with Matthewchuk. I think you could go with his teammate Alexander Barkov. I could hear you out on Adam Fox. I could hear you out on Quinn Hughes. I could hear you out on Matvei Michkov or Matt Celebrini if you think they're really going to hit. I don't think that you can put someone that hasn't played an NHL game yet on this list. Or maybe you could even convince me on an Igor Shesterkin, or probably not Connor Hellebuyck. He's a little bit older. But I went with Matthewchuk for this, considering the fact that he's 26 years old and has 6 years left at $9.5 million. Had a bit of a down year offensively this year just because his first 25, 30 games. He started off really slow. His shooting was horrendous. He could not buy a goal. He had like 5 goals in his first 25 games, but still ended up with 88 points. This guy that had 109 points last year was a Hart finalist. So in looking at Matthewchuk, this guy is the perfect two-way winger, physical, built for the playoffs. I hate to be like an old head, but like he's the ideal playoff kind of performer. So at 26 years old, 6 years left, 9.5. I understand if you go with Alexander Barkov, he has 6 years left at like $10 million, but he's 3 years older. I'm going to go with Matthewchuk here to round out my top 10. So here it is. McDavid, Bedard, Hughes, maybe a little bit controversial, McKinnon, Makar, Draisaitl, Matthews, Stutz, Pastrnak, and Tkachuk. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about this top 10? Who would you move up? Who would you move down? I'll be seeing the next one. I might do a U23 version of this. Let me know in the comments if you want that.